What's going on, YouTube? Today I have a little bit of a story for you. We'll call it Mismanagement from the Top Down, the Ballad of Bad Tony. Now, as we all know, MultiVersus will be shutting its doors down this summer, making my earliest Season 2 prediction of, I don't really think this game is going to be around here Christmas 2025, seem almost prophetic at this point. However, 90% of the game, from content creators, people who are fans of the game, and players of the game, seem to be stacked on the shoulders of the worst company you know, not named EA, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft, Kick, Comcast, Amazon. Man, there are a lot of companies that are terrible in the gaming and tech world. At least no one's stealing breast milk out the refrigerator this time. But apparently, the blame didn't fall on Warner Brothers this time? I don't know where that violent reaction came from. It's not like I'm allergic to giving sympathy to Warner. Brother. Warner. Ooh, okay, we're just gonna pretend that didn't happen because, I mean, I'm trying to say that it's not all Warner. It's not Warner Brothers' fault. I'm not used to coming to Warner Brothers' defense. Violent reaction as someone who's played a lot of NRS games. But regardless, the blame shouldn't be put squarely on their shoulders this time, for it actually should be laid at the feet of one man, MultiVersus game director, Tony Hume. Now look, MultiVersus mismanagement wasn't some small compartmentalized issue that we could overlook because, oh, it was just the developer being a little silly Billy. No, it would seem as though the project was almost sabotaged out of spite, given some of the decisions that were made here, because I don't have any other explanation on how you can make a game that gives me less value than a GameStop trade-in. I can give them a PS5, the keys to my house, my car, a 50 series graphics card, my mortal soul, and they'd be like, hey man, we can give you 37 cents. What? And listen, there's a lot of places to look in here, whether you want to point the finger at lackluster battle passes, odd character choices, the lack of fun things to do in-game for both free and pay-to-play players, or the fact that the game, as a live service game, offered little to no reasonable reason for a player to part with any of their money. All of these are usually the kisses of death for a live service title, and MultiVersus has gone on to prove that it was the rule, not the exception. Because when you opt into being a free-to-play game, the options that you have to sell to people have to be almost limitless. Characters, champions, skills, cosmetics, abilities, expansions to the map, level up items, rarity enhancers, and other super rare exclusive items that capitalize on people's fear of missing out. Imagine if we got C1 on this character. Like, it's not gonna happen. But like, if it did, I'm gonna talk so much shit. It's gonna be crazy.
Oh, you just hit two again.
Security's criminal investigation team.
Oh, okay.
Standing by.
Let's go gambling!
His reactions are top fucking tier.
And on top of that, there are infinitely more predatory ways to do this, where it's like, oh, we're gonna make a really hard S-tier dungeon that's almost impossible to beat as a free-to-play player, but you can play it once per day, and you get a drop. If you get 31 of this drop during the month, then you get to unlock this super omega brain-dead S-tier character that'll basically destroy all endgame content. However, the most of the people who are going to be able to even get this are people who already spent a bunch of money to get the busted teams, and now they're going to spend more money to get even more busted teams to get this character, because now we get to sell to you, but since you only get one chance per day, it'll take you a month. Since the event only goes for a month, you can't miss a day. However, if you do miss a day, you can get a ticket to redo the dungeon for $10. Which means, if you spend $310, you can unlock this character by doing the dungeon 31 times on the first day because you keep buying tickets to keep going into the dungeon that is once per day for free-to-play players. And these options, predatory or otherwise, give developers a chance to get their Moby Dicks, aka their whales. The players who will spend any amount of money to get something ideal to them. While some games are more predatory in this avenue than others, in fighting games, it's almost unheard of to even attempt to do this. Because fighting game players, they don't even want to pay an extra $2 to go to their local. They don't even want to pay an extra $15 to go to a super major. So when games in the fighting game genre try to put the squeeze on their community, oh no, they call it out frame one. Because when it comes to Guilty Gear, Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and especially Smash Brothers, yes, I'm bringing Smash into this conversation. What is one commonality that we have across all of those games? We have an entire terminology for the DLC characters because they always got a different design philosophy that doesn't fit and power creeps the rest of the game. And we're like, dude, what is even this? And even when that does happen, fighting games don't typically have the infinite content well to the point to where they can continue to do this to rack up revenue later on down the line. Usually we don't have to make an obscene amount of multiple purchases in order to secure a character. Usually it's a $5 to $10 fee or $15 to $30 if it's an entire pack put together, but usually it's a one-time charge for that character, and then you never have to spend money on it again. But even when you do, and you are playing the overpowered DLC character like Leroy in Tekken 7, Starfire in Injustice 2, Happy Chaos when he dropped in Season 1 of Guilty Gear Strive, Steve in Smash Bros, Bison, Akuma, and Rashid currently in Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat 9's Kenshi. I just had to sneak that one in there. I still got PTSD to this day because of him. And I don't care if the character's blind. I hate him. And if y'all think that makes me ableist, well, lock me up. And speaking of people who need to be locked up, I don't know if any of you have ever played a game called Pokemon Unite, but I need to explain something to you guys. Because as I said, fighting games cannot sell power to you long term like they can in Pokemon Unite. Because I'm gonna put somebody on the screen. You see him? This guy was a criminal. He was a delinquent. I want him locked. We need to bring back Guantanamo Bay, and we need to make sure that this prisoner, number one. Because first of all, he ran a lot of pockets. Number one, they introduced this guy in a dice game, which means you couldn't buy this character when he first came out. What you had to do was you had to roll dice and go across a board. Now, as a free-to-play player, they made sure that you either got to get the costume at the end of the board or you got the character Darkrai at the end of the board. You had to choose. However, if you were a free-to-play player, they knew that they sell costumes for a higher price than they do characters. So as a free-to-play player, you would roll the dice and you had a limited amount of dice you could roll every single day. You get like one or two. And if you rolled sixes, even if you had great luck, there was a great chance that you would have to make that choice. So you would choose the costume, then pull out your wallet, credit card, PayPal, Google Pay, whatever it was, and then buy the character. However, you could buy dice rolls. And you know what that means. There were people who had this character on day one because they spent not $50, not $100, but $200+ to make sure they got this character so they could have that power fantasy by playing a character that no one knows how to defend against because nobody owns the character except for the people who spent hundreds of dollars on day one. He has an ultimate that's unblockable. It's a command grab that resets his cooldowns. It makes both him and the person he hit with it invisible and unable to be interacted with by anyone. So even if you get hit by it, you can't even call for help and no one knows it's happening, and you will see people walking past you because they literally can't see it. It puts you to sleep. He gets boosted damage for hitting sleeping targets. The ultimate's doing residual damage over time. It makes your monitor black when you get hit by it. He can teleport through walls, and the teleport also does damage. Then over time, they'll nerf that character slowly but surely, then replace them with a new broken OP overlord to ruin the meta via power creep. And you don't do that in a fighting game, because as soon as you do, this is exactly what's gonna happen. Your social media feed is gonna become to, you guys don't know how to balance. I don't think the development team is even awake. They're all doing drugs and cocaine backstage. There's no other explanation for this. I think the developers should be hung from the gallows like they know exactly where the One Piece is, because they're one giant piece of... And if power creep isn't necessarily your style, look at Gacha games. They operate primarily on a slot machine type of storefront, where people could spend hundreds of dollars for a mere chance of unlocking a character or weapon. But it doesn't stop there. They could spend more money to try to roll duplicates of the same character or weapon as an upgrade material to unlock crazy buffs for said character or weapon. So imagine you spend $100 to get a character or weapon that has a 0.025 drop rate, and you get the character. Some people will then spend another $100 to get another copy of that character. So when they merge those two, they get crazy buffs. And a lot of these games have up to 6 dupe slots. So if you truly want to min-max a character, you have to spend money to unlock the character, then put more money into the slot machine to get 6 more copies of that character for a total of rolling this character 7 times. That's a less than 1% drop rate. Then you have to do the same thing for their optimal weapon and roll that 7 times. And then you also have to farm the materials, which you can also spend money to get more chances to get the material. You see what I'm saying? A fighting game, I don't even think they could fathom how to do that for a fighting game.
I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
I lied!
Because MultiVersus most certainly tried it. Remember when they tried to sell you extra lives and attempts and riffs? Cause boy, Pepper Ridge Farm remembers. Which unfortunately only leaves one avenue left, and that's to sell cosmetics. But most players are not gonna bother because once again, they're cosmetic. They don't have any effect on the gameplay, so therefore they're not necessary. Therefore, outside of, oh wow, the aesthetic appeal, people will not feel an itch to reach for their wallet. And those that do, usually will find one skin that they love, and all the other skins that come out for that character pale in comparison, so they'll never have a reason to come out of pocket a second time. Now, at some point, you gotta figure out how to sell something else, and the solution that almost every game that identifies as a live service will decide on is time. Now you have to figure out how to sell time. 1. I know players who paid exclusively for the early access part. Yeah, it's me. I did that. Where you buy the combat pack and you get all the characters for 2 weeks early when they release. So if it comes out February 14th, I get the character because I ordered the entire pack early. I get it February 1st, and I can play it for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, someone who just wants to buy 1 or 2 characters from the pack individually, they gotta wait till the 14th before they can even touch the character. Oh, and individually, the characters might be like $5 a pop, but the pack itself will be like $30. So it guarantees that they're getting their money's worth out of me for the 2 weeks of exclusivity. Which means if you are a content creator, 9 times out of 10, you are pigeonholed in order to do that so you can get the early content for the views, etc., so on and so forth. And people who just really loved one character would buy an entire pack for $30, $40, or $50, knowing they have zero intention of playing any other characters that come with that pack, but just so they can play their main squeeze 2 weeks early. And this is why you'll see games intentionally withhold the characters that are fan favorites and put them as DLC, because they know that will incentivize people to part with their money. That being said, there are always going to be just as many people who are willing to buy these packs as people who are not willing to pay that premium. And don't let social media be your moral compass. Don't let your social media be what you think is the main feed. Do not let your social media be what you think is a reliable narrator, because I'm here to tell you now, if that was the case, Mortal Kombat is dead. Mortal Kombat was shot and put out back like Old Yeller. There will never be another Mortal Kombat game because it is by far the single worst franchise in the entire fighting game community. What do you mean it's always in the top 10? What do you mean more people are playing that online than any of the other fighting games? What's happening? Why is it in the top 10 in sales? How does it keep making money? In order for me to make myself feel good now, I will now post the Steam charts. Yeah, that'll get them. Got them. Now you may be asking yourself, okay, but how does this point to Tony? Well, apparently, Warner Brothers took a very hands-off approach to this game. I know, shocking to me too. Even though they bought out Player First Games in what apparently has been reported as an attempt to phase Tony out of the company because they liked the idea of MultiVersus, but they liked creative control even more than the idea of the game. And obviously pushing a CEO out takes time, yada yada, etc., etc. But other than that, they basically told him, hey, do you, boo-boo. And according to some of his former co-workers, Tony is terrible at management and all elements of design, basically except for gameplay. And this makes the statements levied against MultiVersus QA team even more damning because allegedly they just play the game. That's literally all they do. They just play the game with Tony and they talk about balance and they're like, we're friends and we're clicked up and we don't really ask the hard questions and we're oblivious to other things because we're just yes-menning it up with each other, which means all the QA is coming from basically one concise lens with only one viewpoint and lacks perspective, and makes QA incredibly inconsistent and biased because they either just don't bother to test things sometimes, don't notice things other times, and they're basically immune to criticism because they're homies. And if somebody outside that circle says, hey, I don't think the QA team actually tested X, Y, and Z, Tony apparently gets very upset and very angry, not at the fact that the QA didn't get done, but because why would you even say that? And all of that is just recipe for a terrible work environment for those who are not in that QA team, because let's be honest, other people are gonna be like, every time I go up there, I just get yelled at. And if at any point it seems like somebody's talking to a brick wall long enough, that eventually they're just gonna stop talking to the brick wall. Or worse, they'll just stop talking altogether. And some anonymous reports are saying he's an egomaniac who thinks he's Elon Musk-like, which You do with that statement what y'all will, but he'll micromanage things that he thinks are cool, like rifts, and ignore things that he thinks are dull, like missions. And then sweep in one day and be like, hey, I demand all of you people change anything. I'm cracking the whip. You guys are going to do this and that, which probably feels why MultiVersus development felt directionless at times, aimless at times, and they didn't have an identity in their head, which that's one of the worst things you can have as a problem as a game developer. And allegedly, most of the people who had decision-making power or sway within player-first games seem to be super reactive to whatever Ajax and crew, aka the people who had the hardcore player mindset, not the game design mindset, which led to the dev team being more reactive to just a loud post on Reddit and Twitter. And trust me, you don't want those people designing your game. And as many others have said, not just me, whether it be Uncle Spamuel, Veriflied, or Tricky Gesture, all people who dropped the game way before I did, they've all said in one way or another, it seems like social media is designing their game, and that they just let the loud accounts on Twitter make those decisions for them. And well, it seems like the proof may be in fact in the pudding. However, I'm a fair man, I'm a fair content creator, and as you guys can see on screen, Ajax posted recently, don't believe everything you read on the internet. He said he's going to be dropping his information tomorrow and all the patch notes, which he alleges there's over 50 pages of. So at that point, we have got to say tomorrow should be very interesting and an even more interesting video. And from what I could tell, none of this looked inherently malicious. It just seemed like people said they were competent enough to do a job, then it turns out they were not competent enough to do that job. Perhaps it was simply just underestimating the undertaking that they were going to be going through, or perhaps it was just ego at some point down the line, getting the better of the team. Who knows? Maybe we never find out the cold hard truth. But anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow and we'll see what them patch notes are looking like.